Here we are for another weekly team hangout. This time we're joined with Thomas and Hein. Thanks guys for joining. How are you doing this week?
Thank you. Pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, also doing good.
I'm doing great. We posted the progress update earlier in this week, and it's great to see that things are progressing steadily, and there's good progress on DuskEVM and what's coming. So I think you guys probably had a pretty fun and good week with some nice progress. But because we did have that update, we also have a couple of questions to go through from the community.
Right.
Nice setup, Hein. You got a setup upgrade, I see. Looking
No
like
comment. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, since you guys are doing so good, then let's get into the questions. Let me just double check one more time. Recording is on. Everyone should be able to hear us properly. If you can't, do let me know, and then I'll make sure to have everything set up. But if everything is working properly, then we can start with the questions. The first question is someone said that they saw the FFI data driver being merged to the master, which is awesome. And can you give some examples of where to use that?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a technical thing, right? The communication between smart contracts from Rust to other environments is quite difficult because we use let's say a serialization format that is a bit, a translation format that is a bit Rust specific, which makes it almost completely impossible to use outside of that context. So what we've done with the data driver is we've built a system that makes the communication easier. So what you can do is you can basically ask for a given smart contract, hey, which functions do you provide? And then it replies back and it says, hey, how do I translate this data that you want? How can I translate that in my environment? Or can you translate this set of data for me? And so we've added a generalized library for that. We've added that for the stake contract and the transfer contract, that so that clients, applications that require this can more easily communicate with these contracts, and anyone else can use it, right? So, for example, Soju is doing the liquid staking protocol, right? And they also have need to communicate with from clients to their smart contracts, so they can start implementing that functionality. And we, of course, need it as well for our L1 bridge from Dusk DS to DuskEVM. To communicate that, we have multiple clients that need to listen to what's happening on the contract, so making calls to the contracts, and this functionality then makes it a lot easier to use that in different locations.
Got it. So it's sort of like a data translator in a way.
Yeah, like you can see it as a translator.
Interesting. I mean, for my non-technical mind, that seems like a fair comparison. Okay, thank you. That makes sense. The next question would be, it was said before that the dApp is being worked on in parallel. And someone is wondering does this mean that they could both land pretty close to one another, or is there a different approach? And I think this would probably be a good question for Thomas, since Thomas, I believe you're working quite closely on the dApp.
Yeah, exactly. So the dApp is indeed being worked on in parallel. We also, on our side internally, expect that they will be landing pretty close to each other. We have adjusted our plan with the dApp last week, and we are going towards a phased approach, which means, so basically we are planning out what kind of features we want to have, etc., obviously. And on the DuskEVM side, those phases are, for example, more internally until we can launch it. And on the dApp side, for what we are now developing, those phases are pretty surely externally, which means there will be different variants of the application landing. We have made out some plans to get to a faster time to market there. We're not going now into details what each phase would include, but basically we have a pretty logical plan how we are going to launch with the app, what kind of specific aspects are very important to make it functional and usable, and what things are of a lower priority, which we can still adjust after it has already hit the market. And that's the plan we are now at the moment doing and going forward with.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would say that this phased approach has been the plan from the start, right? It's just that how solid these phases look like has changed a little bit, but it doesn't really matter that much. But yeah, but the idea is more that you will not wait for integrations with, let's say, 5 different providers, right? Like if you have the first one, you just go live with it, and then you add products gradually. So that would be one of the reasons to do it, right? Another thing to mention is more about team compositions, right? So within Dusk, we used to have quite some projects, I would say. And in the last couple of months, we've completely cut that down to basically 2 large projects, 2 very small ones on the side that are not that relevant. But everyone now in the team basically is in one of the 2 camps on the tech side. And even from BD and marketing, some people can be as part of this team as well. It depends a bit on how deep they are in certain aspects. And marketing is a bit across, right? Like you guys are basically cross project in that sense. So everyone is really focused on these projects. I am not sure exactly what I would say the split is at the moment, like 60-40, 70-30% DuskEVM stocks. So something about that, give or take. I think it's more 60-40.
Yeah. It's something like that. And you are mentioning stocks, the name, which some people were a bit confused about because that's currently the name we mainly use internally, right? It's not the final name that's going to be for the app, but just so everyone is aware of that, it's not the final name that's going to be in production, but it's just so it's easier to differentiate between what we're talking about. So when we mention stocks, it is the dApp we're working on, but it's not necessarily a rebrand of anything. It's just a current terminology we use internally. So it could change. It's most definitely probably going to change. Yeah. But thanks. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Thomas and Hein. So it is going to be a phased approach, and we're not necessarily going to wait for every single thing to be ready. For the dApp to launch, but it's going to be a phased approach so that you still have some things to do in the beginning, but it's not going to be necessarily like full force ahead. Just because we want to make sure that we get product market fit and go to market as soon as possible, right? Instead of waiting for everything to be ready, it's going to be upgraded quite frequently depending on each phase, right? Yeah, that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a product, right? So it's never really done. So what are you waiting for, right? At a certain point, you have the base functionality in place that people can use it, and then you want to push it out and test the product market fit, right? That's like the most common thing to do. It's also when it's an application, it's very different from when it's a piece of infrastructure, right? So like the implications there are quite different.
Yeah. And since we are talking about apps, someone is also wondering if partners have started doing any tests and how those tests are ongoing for partners on the EVM side. And is there any friction or rather positive feedback from their end?
Well, I mean, I would say there are third parties that want to build against it, right? We have told them if they don't need to, just test against existing EVM systems. That is because our network wasn't that stable. But that's something I can go back into later when we talk a bit about. I think there are some questions around. It's a similar question that was already asked, so I can expand a bit on that. So. In the last couple of weeks, we had 2 bugs to fix, right? Like you always have bugs when you're trying to build stuff. One was a memory leak that was recently fixed, and another was that we saw on the L2 rollbacks of the state, and that's quite a problem. Now, what the reason for this was, we have spent a lot of time investigating this. This has to do with the setup that we had. So what we've done is we've done testing gradually. from partially moving over parts of the DuskEVM system to communicate with Dusk DS. So it started first with the blob transaction, so data availability would be tested on Dusk DS, and the bridging would happen on a Ethereum-like instance. And this Ethereum-like instance was causing us a lot of trouble because it was not behaving as expected. I won't go into details, but it caused some problems. And we are now moving over fully to Dusk DS as also the bridging layer. Those contracts have been in a usable state for quite a while, so it was the right time to do that. But we were investigating, especially where this bug came from. And today I was speaking to some of the people that are working on it, and they said to me, "Yeah, we haven't observed this reorganization on the full Dusk DS connection with DuskEVM. So that's one of the first things we'll do. And once we have that in place, we can also start launching the public testnet." And then it would be a very strong recommendation for third parties to actually start using this, because there are a couple that are that want to test stuff, but they don't really need it to test whether the application itself works, right? Because it's just a redeploy. The behavior is exactly the same. If they know the caveats of optimism, it also applies to us. But we do want to publish these endpoints so that people can start using it. And it's not only that these partners need it per se, but it's also for other people that want to start playing with it and maybe start deploying from a community, right? Or developers that are following Dusk that want to do this. So I mean, I've been deploying some stuff myself. Some of our people internally have been deploying stuff ourselves. But if every so often it leads to a reset of the state, well, it's not that nice.
No, of course,
because we haven't touched the L2 itself at all, right? So all we're doing is basically translating between the two networks, and that is quite a difficult job in itself, and translating the smart contracts. But the L2 itself just works as any DuskEVM would work as any form. Even when we go over to the same block finality and all of the other properties that we're working on and that we have in mind, it would still behave the same way as a network.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's good to see that. It's good to hear that, even though there were a couple of bugs, which is expected, that these got fixed, and now that it's getting ready to run on Dusk DS, it's running smoothly, and we're getting closer to a stable testnet, which could also be launched to the public. Makes sense. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yep,
that's good to hear.
Yeah, most developers are also interested in not asking how they could develop smart contracts. That's obviously generally known. The key information piece, which they usually ask for, which they need confirmation on, is to which degree do we have EVM equivalence, which means what kind of opcodes work in the way like it is on Ethereum, or what kind of stuff works in the way like it is on Optimism. And once they have the qualification there, and potentially any other information on specific archive nodes, indexing nodes to get their data into the UIs they want to deploy for their dApps, it's generally already done what they need to do, right? So the only thing that they potentially do is they do a test deployment and check out if everything works, but they don't need to conduct any extensive further testing there. And the feedback which we want to receive from them is then on our side, mostly in my opinion, regarding specific information pieces that they did not know before, which we then can use and know, okay, that's something which we will put into our documentation for developers.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in the end, there is not much that will change there. So I do not expect that to be a lot of issues. Like if you see what sort of requests they usually put in, it's like these very long forms, Excel sheets with like 50 different questions. But once you fill one of them in, you provide the proper endpoints and whatnot. As a proper Solidity development team, what they do is they deploy the contract and they run a set of tests with the endpoints defined, and if everything passes, it's fine for them, and they just are like, okay, let's go. Just give me the mainnet endpoint. I'll make sure I have some coins on it on the wallet that I deploy with, and you're ready to go. It's just adding an extra network is usually trivial work.
Right, and especially since some of them already have their their dApps already developed on other EVM networks. Getting them on top of DuskEVM is just a piece of cake and very familiar to them. And like Thomas said, as long as there's not a real differences in terms of that they should know, it should usually work pretty well. It's good to hear that there's no, that is the case, even in practice. Because of course, there's always the theoretical side, and then there's the practical side, which could always happen, contain some unknowns. And actually, since we are talking about dApps, someone was also asking if which dApps are currently developing on the EVM, and if those dApps come from existing ecosystems or newly built on the EVM. Now, I'm not sure how deep we can go in this, but definitely we can't give any names at this moment. But possibly, could we give out examples of dApps that could launch on DuskEVM in the future?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm gonna say some things, it's too easy to deduce who I'm talking about, and that's a marketing opportunity loss. But let's say, I think one of the things that's asked a lot is, will you have a bridge? Yes, we are talking to a very large bridge provider, and that are at the point of finalizing a deal. Will you have an Oracle provider? Yes, we'll have a very large Oracle provider and are also signing a deal with them. And there are also some apps that, some bigger names, some smaller ones that we're looking at. But yeah, I can give the names. Yeah, I'll let people speculate. There's some very interesting things happening in the background, but.
Yeah, I think the question, if it's from existing ETH ecosystem or newly built on EVM, the short answer would be just both. Obviously, the dApp we are developing is from our side. It's not in the EVM ecosystem yet because it's not out yet at all. And the other dApps that are deployed, like Hein already said, they are smaller or larger names that are already on other EVM networks.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense, yeah. And you did say that it is overall a phased approach, right? So it's not going to be like DuskEVM is going to go live, and on the first day we're going to expect like 20 different apps to go live at the same time, right? It's like you mentioned, it's going to be more of a phased approach. So we're probably going to have the launch, then of course it is expected to have listings and partner announcements. Of course, not giving any names, but that's definitely going to happen. It's much easier with DuskEVM, and it's something we've been waiting to do and quite excited to announce. And then we're going to have the dApp that we're working on stocks, and then there's going to be the other dApps that are going to get onboarded, right? So just so everyone knows what to expect.
Yeah, I would say that also stocks is a killer app, right? It's like the combination of everything we want to do. So that is I would say the most important one. And everything that joins besides that is a good addition. But when it comes to apps and dApps and deployments, this is completely dependent on the pipeline of the third party, right? So let's say we would deploy DuskEVM tomorrow. That doesn't guarantee that and by the way, don't take that as it will happen tomorrow. It's just a hypothetical, right? That doesn't mean that third parties will be able to deploy tomorrow, right? So you need to weigh that against what is their pipeline like, what is our release schedule like, and then who do we want to have on launch? And also you need to weigh, do you want to release all the ammunition in one go, right? Do you want to go with one big bang, or do you want to spread that out over time? So these are all things you need to consider. So it's not a singular answer that you can get to.
Yeah, but I think that's pretty clear. That gives a pretty good idea of what the plan is. Thank you. One of the features we were working on at some point was DuskPay, and someone was mentioning it that they were very excited about DuskPay, and DuskPay it's a really cool service, but it is like they also mentioned that the priority of DuskPay has been pushed down further down the list because of DuskEVM, and also because, like Emma mentioned in the past, the regulations changed in the country of our partner with the Italian companies that we are partnered with. So it's not as urgent for them to implement this solution, which is why the solution also got pushed down further down the list. And the question is, will this become a priority again in the future, or what the plan or the future plan of DuskPay is?
Well, DuskPay is quite interesting because the concept of payments are already there in mainnet in a certain form, except not with the currency you want, right? And we can easily bring that in DuskEVM. So there are some things going on in the background that allow for on and off ramping. We're also looking for partners and white label solutions to do all sorts of things there, but I don't want to go too deep into it. It's quite we can do some quite interesting things there.
Fair enough, but it is so it is something that that we're going to be revisiting in the future. So it's and there's different kind of things that we can do with DuskPay. With what was already
and I mean
and more.
Yeah, exactly, because the payment side, I don't want to go too deep into this, but the payment side is also very interesting if you're on a network where you have, let's say, securities, right, and you're gaining yield on those securities, and you might want to use the funds you earn there partially to start doing payments as well, right? So let's say you have a money market fund, or you have a fund that yields you 3 to 12% or something per year, right? If you have, let's say, €1,000 or 10,000 euros in there, and you start earning some yield on that, if you want to start using part of that to do payments, to do immediate off-ramping, well, you can do some really interesting things there. So that's definitely a space that we're looking at to integrate later on.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds exciting and interesting. Looking forward to learn more about it once.
It's really nice. Yeah, it's really nice because this does not only apply to people that have securities, right? Like you can also, as a node operator, for example, start using this functionality or a mix of this functionality. So there's a lot of things that can be done there.
Yeah, streamlined off-ramping in such a way is really beneficial, because then you can use the network not only for your investments, but also for your daily payments, for example, because you have a streamlined process on both buying assets, onboarding assets on a chain, but also off-ramping them. And there are also even other use cases that you could potentially do. For example, if you, instead of having a money market fund, you have some asset with an upside that you don't want to sell, and you need some short-term liquidity, and then if there is some money market, you can lend against it and use those stablecoins to off-ramp in some easily streamlined way. So there are definitely some learnings we made from DuskPay, and we will obviously try to leverage them now on DuskEVM. And it will be interesting to see when we're going to revisit that.
Amazing. So DuskPay is actually getting a sort of an upgrade in a sense. Nice.
Would be kind of cool if you had like a card, right, and you could do payments. But
who knows? That does sound. That gives me an idea. That does give me an idea. Well, what would you use DuskPay with, right? Stablecoins is one way to also use it, and this gives me a perfect opportunity to ask the next question, which is, will EUROQ also launch on DuskEVM? And if yes, is there any progress on that, or on the integration of that and bridging EUROQ from other chains to Dusk? Or what's the plan around?
Well, we need... Yeah, but we need EUROQ. We simply need EUROQ for as a settlement currency, right? And also as a payment currency. They will be on DuskEVM, or at least one of the Quantos tokens will be. But they will not be the only one, because we're also talking to a couple of on-off rampers that use a different stablecoin, and we want to include that one as well. So we're also in talks with another party. And we're talking with a bridging partner that has support for multiple others as well, like USDT and USDC, and we can get those over as well. They will not be like the native issued asset, right? Like they will not be the source chain on Dusk, but it is possible to lock them on one side of the bridge and then have a bridged variant on DuskEVM.
Nice. That sounds awesome. So multiple.
Yeah, but I mean, this is super important. Like the value here is super high. Like you can use basically any stablecoin then that comes from any other network that's supported. And I don't know exactly how many, but there's like a ton of them. It's all the big ones, of course, and some smaller ones. And we basically can get that liquidity into Dusk as well.
Mm-hmm. Huge opportunity. It's good.
Yeah, definitely.
It's good to hear this has all been kind of thought out quite thoroughly. Good stuff. Now, one of the last questions we have from the community is: are there any updates on the economic model of DuskEVM?
No, there are not. So what we've done at the moment is we have a fixed price for blob transactions. It's like 1 million lux, I think, which is equivalent in cost to what a Phoenix transaction costs. So if you have one blob in a transaction, that's how much you pay. And on the DuskEVM side, we're thinking of a couple of things we can do, because the pricing at the moment is really low. And we might want to tune that up a bit to make the cost more expensive, not to the same level as on DuskDS, but at least a little bit closer. And if we get excess transaction value out there of that, we might want to do some things with that might constitute a burn or whatever. We'll have to see. Or we might give it back to the stakers in some form, but we'll have to see how that looks like. But this needs to be tuned properly. Yeah, exactly.
With the modular architecture, because we want to align the network towards the L1, we don't want to have a separate network in the future, obviously. So it also makes sense now already to align the fee model, because this will be seen as one chain in the future.
Yeah, but the only problem with looking at this in isolation is that someone else, in theory, could also deploy a DuskEVM instance, right? And if they don't do the fee give back, then our application layer would be more expensive in comparison. So there would be a strong incentive to move to the other one. So from a security point of view, it would then make sense to see how the network starts playing along and adjust the fee to something that is a bit more reasonable on DuskDS. Now, does it really matter? At the moment, it doesn't matter that much. Why doesn't it matter? Because the majority of incentivization comes from the issuance of the Dusk tokens on DuskDS, right? What you want to prevent is that it is too cheap to do an attack. So from the incentivization point of view, it's fine. From the attacking side, it might be a slight problem, but we can easily tune that. Like it's not uncommon to tune the parameters here. Ethereum has done it multiple times. For example, in their case, they had underpricing of state, which led to people using much more state relative to what they wanted for the state to grow. So they tuned the parameters to make state more expensive and started doing other things to make non-state using of data cheaper. That's also why you got the blob transactions at some point. So we'll have to see. The proof is in the pudding. We've already started tuning a little bit, but the actual implications is something you'll end up seeing in production.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
it's all a hypothesis, right? So
it all depends. Yeah, exactly on production, what the needs are going to be, and how we want to balance it out. Okay, we just got a couple of more questions. I see in chat as well from G. He's asking, do we expect an NPEX dApp on DuskEVM? And I think there's a bit of a confusion here, because in the past we used the terminology NPEX dApp, and then in different scenarios we use different terminology around the dApp that we are working on. And I think there might be a confusion here. So it's not necessarily going to be an NPEX dApp. But I guess, Hein, if you wanna describe it a bit better, just so we get rid of this confusion.
Yeah, I'll give it to Thomas.
Yeah. So basically, what we're building is the NPEX dApp. Why is that? Well, because NPEX is our first partner, which we're heavily tied in with, and NPEX has the licenses, which means if we would just go and now launch DuskEVM and wanna do some dApp like that and serve European customers, we are not able to do that because we are not compliant with the certain things that we need to be compliant with, and we do not have the licenses, which means that this dApp is more or less a joint effort between Dusk and NPEX. And also with the phased approach, for example, I can tell as much that one of those phases in the future will obviously also be the alignment of the NPEX infrastructure with this dApp. Because in the long run, we want to run the financial market infrastructure on a DLT.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So what happens here is we are basically the technology provider. There will be a Dusk branding on it, but in the background, a lot of the processes are handled by NPEX from a regulatory point of view, right?
Right.
So they, when you buy an asset, the ownership of the asset is in custody of NPEX. And it's in custody of NPEX in their stichting, which means that if the operational business, even from Dusk or from NPEX itself, collapses, the assets that the user bought, the underlying, are secure. And the due diligence aspect is also on NPEX. So everyone that participates in the dApp, so if we buy assets through third parties, where NPEX has the role of a broker, they can derive the KYC from NPEX as a regulated entity that already has quite heavy processes in place for KYC AML. So,
Yep.
so this makes it quite powerful. It's really the merger of what we're doing. And this is really a step up towards the native issuance, because we will integrate the NPEX exchange into DuskEVM into the stocks application. And once we have the full on-chain issuance through the DLTR, then we can use this application as well. That will just be another integration pipeline into this application.
Right.
Yeah, you also mentioned something very interesting about the Stichting, which could be translated in the English term as a trust, which is a completely separate entity. And the legal definition of a Stichting is basically that it owns itself, which means even if NPEX would go bankrupt and has a ton of debt, that debt can never be settled by the Stichting, because that is money from the actual investors, which also is a big difference towards specific other tokenized assets you could technically own, which are under custody by a certain company, where you just have more or less an IOU. Whereas on our dApp, if you buy this token is the legitimate representation and right in the accounting system of NPEX, more or less, that uses the DLT to an underlying existing asset which lies in the Stichting, which means that you actually, even though we are tokenizing and there's a wrapper around that because we cannot natively issue yet, this still is a very much legit ownership on your side, and you have the absolute security that if anything happens, you will not go with nothing in the end.
Mm-hmm. No, that's huge, and that's the whole difference between what other companies, I guess, are doing in tokenization versus what we're trying to do and what we're aiming for, where you have the right of owning and claiming the asset and the full rights behind it. Right, it's not just like you mentioned in the past, something on an Excel sheet that you have no right on. Okay, I think that
yeah, I mean, that's what you see now a lot, right? So
yeah.
That's one of the first things you saw, as in, for example, in Germany, you have the EWPG law, which is basically the issuance of bonds on chain, but those are spreadsheets. You can do nothing with them in essence. You just buy them once and you let it be. And it's the same thing that we did with the bond, right? The bond for us was a trial run. We learned a lot from that, a lot of the things that we're applying now, but it's not the real deal. And we're working towards the real deal. This is already a very big step forward, because it's a very different product from what the others are offering, where you actually have ownership and the asset, the appreciation in value is directly tied to the asset itself. So you get the payout in value over time, which is like a really cool side effect of the assets we want to provide. And from there, it's a matter of going to those natively issued, right? Technically, the natively issuance is not the biggest problem. It's getting the exemption. So we're waiting for those exemptions, and then we can apply that as well. But this is a very powerful way to already attract an unbelievably amount of TVL if there's enough appetite in the market. Even TVL from other chains, right? Because we've set up the architecture of stocks, the dApp, to pull in liquidity from different chains as well. So you can pay, for example, for an asset on a different chain, and then the asset will be issued on top of DuskEVM, and it will just go to the Dusk TVL.
Yeah, exactly. And also, once our processes are in place in terms of integrations with asset providers, we are able to provide such assets in an easier way than others, because we do not need to issue a new product which is wrapped behind a certificate whatsoever, which means if there is enough user demand and liquidity for us to make it viable to offer a new asset, be it now an MMF, an ETF, or stock, we are basically able to just buy them from a certain exchange, then we tokenize them and we make them available on the app. So this is just another matter of expanding our integrations in the existing processes we are at the moment developing.
Right.
Yep.
And that's mainly through NPEX's broker license, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. So the dApp is basically a joint venture between, a joint project between Dusk and NPEX. It's not necessarily purely an NPEX dApp, but it's a dApp we're working on together, putting into place everything that we've been working towards all of these years, and taking advantage of NPEX's regulatory compliance and all of their licenses, putting it all together into something very exciting. Good stuff. Now, the second question from G was, beyond testing, is there anything else that needs to be done before DuskEVM can go live? And a small comment here, G, you can also read the latest progress update. That gives a good idea of what we've done, what is still in progress. One of the main factors being the layer 1 bridge, which still has a little bit of things that need to be worked on. There is a sneak peek of the web wallet integration in there. It's an example, might not be the exact final design, but it gives an idea of what that's going to look like. And now we're working on tying it all together, tying the web wallet and a smart contract together for the bridge. But except for that, I believe then it's just going to be testing and validation. But Hein or Thomas, you can probably give a bit more detail on that if you would like to.
Yeah, no, it's indeed. I think the update describes it really well.
Cool.
Don't think there's much to add there.
So go read the update, guys. It's a good one. And I think this other question, I believe, has been answered in the past. But he's asking, what is the throughput that we can expect on DuskEVM?
Yeah, so I know that there is a theoretical limit that we've seen before. That's like 1,500 TPS. But I mean, what does this mean, right? I have to test it. I've been trying to test somewhat on my side very naively. And I got to 3 TPS simply because I get a RPC timeout. So I need to go unconstrained at some time and see what we can push through. But if we reach any of these levels with the applications that we're offering, then I think Sarab's answer is definitely answered, but his question is definitely answered. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we get a good amount of TVL and a lot of transactions going, and we should be able to fulfill any need in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, exactly. So the TPS is high enough, just like any other L2 at the moment, that there is no scalability issue, just as on L1s like Ethereum, for example. And also with the increased adoption of all those layer 2 networks, I can expand a little bit on that. Normally those sequencers which you have now from Optimism, Arbitrum whatsoever, which they chip as their default implementation, there are already a multitude of companies right now who are building custom sequencers. That means they are rebuilding them from scratch or they're adjusting them for more performance. So if you have a sequencer on Optimism, which is the default one, and let's say that one can do 1,000 transactions per second, there are already sequencers out there, like the G2 one, for example, which can do a lot more. Now, do we want to have that at the launch right now? Well, probably not, because we don't even need the transactions per second at the moment. But if we, in any way, reach that limit at one point, I think it's fair to say that then this network has been successful to an extent that we have absolutely no problem in switching out the sequencer to one which can do a lot more TPS than the current one.
Yeah, this technology is becoming so commoditized that it doesn't really matter that much anymore, right? It's other people are innovating on it, and whatever is open source we can use. And when you look, for example, at Dusk DS itself, like Thomas said, the performance problems are usually in the L1, and it's on Ethereum side. But Dusk DS is already 10 times or more faster than Ethereum itself. We can get throughputs on private transactions in the range of 300 transactions per second, fully private, right, on an L1. So, I mean, more is theoretically better, but hey, let's first start filling that block space, right? I think that's more important than these fictitious numbers, because if you look at the whole Ethereum space, I think they do combined 1,500 transactions per second. It's not even 1/10 of that. Maybe 150 transactions, 200 transactions per second. That's the L1 Ethereum and all of its L2s combined. So, and these are not even high value transactions, right? These are not RWA transactions. 90% is meme coin trading and bots, right? Arbitrage bots. So, what are we talking about here, right? Let's go to adoption.
One interesting thing you now mentioned is about our L1, which is much more performant, but also the mere fact that we own the L1, right? So we're not Arbitrum or the Optimism Foundation, and we are in a position that we need to make something work with an existing Ethereum chain, which may have other goals technically, or which we may not be able to soft or hard fork that easily. But well, we want to enshrine the L2 at one point, and that's also the reason why we are in a much better position to do a lower finality time, which means we are going from 7 days down to something much less, because we are able to adjust the L1 to that L2, and by the fact that we can adjust that L1, we are also able to, for example, default proofs, which are being done to prove that the L2 is doing the transactions correctly, they do not necessarily need to live on a smart contract, which is kind of a bottleneck. We can put them directly in the consensus. And when you look, for example, at how Optimism does it, it's a nested virtual machine which is re-executing an Ethereum instance. So it is very imperformant, but that's how they make it work with an existing blockchain like Ethereum. We can technically do it without all of those abstractions, and every layer of abstraction that you wrap around it is obviously another bottleneck.
Yeah, I mean, and we already have a potential pathway to do this. One of my ideas there was just to do the same thing we did with the proofs, because the proving of an L2 transaction or L2 block is an independent action, right? You have an input, the input data, which is a root, like a calculation of how the state was before. And you have the data in a block transaction, and you get an output, which is the end state once you've done that computation. And if you have these data points and you execute that when one of these transactions lands in the mempool, you can do the computation. You can even do 10 of them or more in parallel in theory. And then you can, when the transaction hits a consensus, you can already say, oh, I already observed this transaction coming in. I already know the result of this computation. And then in the consensus, they don't need to do the computation again. So this is, computationally speaking, for a node, this is meaningless. It doesn't affect the block generation time at all. Like, this can be done completely separately, and in that way you can basically reject transactions that do not get the result you want, and you have this thing done in a way that no one else does. Yeah, like blah blah blah. But
No,
Yeah, I think to summarize this in non-technical terms, it's basically we have much more freedom in thinking about how we
Yeah.
want to build our architecture because we are in control of the development of both the L1 now and the L2, and we have a clear goal towards a modular architecture where we can adjust both things to align with each other in a much better way than other disconnected chains ever could be.
No, yeah, I think it was good to get the more technical side as well. I'm sure there's a lot of people that understand it, even if I might not, but I got the gist of it. So thank you, Hein.
Yeah, but I mean, the important thing about this is the finality difference is quite important from a legal point of view. Because when it comes to regulators, what they want to see is a quick finality on the transactions. They don't want this limbo state. They don't want a consensus that, or even like regulated transactions that can revert after a certain time. And because our consensus is already designed to be within this 10-second time frame that EU regulators want to see for transaction finality, if you have same block finality on the L2 transactions where you do the regulated regulatory compliant transactions, then you meet the standard, and nobody else can do this. I don't know of any other chain or L2 combination that is able to match the current settlement regulations you have within the EU. I don't think there's anyone that does it. And we can,
exactly.
because we have the control.
Because to go a bit deeper into those regulations, if you run an exchange on chain, you need to be compliant with MiFID II, and MiFID II mandates you to report those transactions by the next day. And if you report those transactions by the next day, but the finality is in 5 days, and let's say there is really a catastrophic event where in 5 days the chain would reorganize, well, what do? You cannot just tell the local authority, like in the Netherlands, the AFM, hey, the past 5 days where I've been reporting those MiFID II obligations, they were all wrong.
Yeah, they're no longer correct.
Like, that's not something which they just say, yeah, okay, we're just gonna delete them now from our database and start from scratch.
Yeah, no, that's not something that they can just forget. That's actually really interesting. There's so many regulatory scenarios which a lot of people might not be aware of. This was very interesting, even for me to find out more about. I think it would be quite interesting to do a session just on like regulations and how we built Dusk in order to meet these regulations and what the regulations are, like the different requirements. Of course, the more interesting stuff, not getting into all of them, because I'm sure there's a ton of boring ones. But I think this was pretty interesting to learn more about, and the fact that Dusk is probably one of the few that can meet this finality regulation. It's pretty cool to know. So thanks, guys. I'll probably get you back for another session on regulations. Sorry, not sorry.
Now, I think it's better to maybe put Ryan on, but
no, for sure. Now it's almost 10 more minutes to the hour, so I just want to ask one more question, and this is the last one, I promise. So I've noticed that there's a lot more conversation around EVM chains and EVM compatibility lately. So do you think that this trend will continue in the next year, in the near future? And given our modular approach, how do you see it evolve over the next year? Basically, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I must say I would find it curious to hear what Thomas thinks about this. But on our side, you do see this trend, right? Very clearly that people are standardizing around the Ethereum APIs. And we now support them, which is quite important. And on the other side, you do also see that other execution layers, like for example Solana or even Bitcoin, are becoming more integrated in existing Ethereum tools, right? Because you also now see them being supported in MetaMask. I've seen some other tools where I'm like, oh wait, I can also create a Solana wallet with same mnemonic and all that sort of stuff. In theory, we can do that as well, right? That's not a problem. But I don't think that is where our strength will be at the moment. So we are slowly still investing in the Dust DS execution layer, right? Especially with the long term in mind. But I think that it has been a very good move for us to also support the EVM in the way that we have. This does not exclude anything we've done in the past, right? Everything we've done in the past is still valid and remains valid and will have a role, because there are some really interesting things we can do once we have a little bit more freedom to execute on things. But at the moment, we see that this is the best path forward to mass adoption.
Love it.
Using
Thomas.
EVM.
Yeah. Thomas, what's your take on it? I'm curious on your take as well.
Yeah, I think moving towards EVM for the applications at the moment is one of the best moves we could have done, because it became a market standard across a multitude of institutions, dApps, and other integration parties. Now, we are not going to say that other large blockchains are not well adopted, but it's still a large difference to Ethereum. There's one big exemption that I would make, which is, for example, Solana. But I don't think that Solana, in terms of the institutional grade thing, is old enough to have grown towards an ecosystem where not only meme coins are traded, but also serious TradFi stuff is being developed on, which is indeed also happening right now, but it's not in the relation of how it's going currently with Ethereum, because the competition is too big. Because Solana as an alternative architecture is not only competing with Ethereum, it's also competing with Tron, BNB, Avalanche, C-Chain, Polygon, and any other EVM chain, because they're all EVM, right? So the network effect of EVM networks is one of the strongest we have in the blockchain industry right now.
Yep.
And one of the most logical choices to go for at the moment. And like Hein already said, the stuff we have on DuskDS is not suddenly invalid. It's still a valid thing, which we did now. And especially now with going towards the modular architecture, we have much more freedom in adapting towards any other future trend, in my opinion, which means, let's say we have the application layer on DuskEVM for specific DeFi use cases. We have the stocks application there where people can hold and buy assets. And then let's say we have a use case where people have an ETF savings plan running on DuskEVM. They buy it once per month, or some people buy here and there some MMFs. But that is still very much different from a use case where you want to conduct high frequency trading, which means you maybe have a future market, you have a perpetual market, you have anything where a lot of transactions are happening. And our modular architecture could technically support that, because you can just boot up another L2. It works with the modular architecture. Now, if we are going to do that, this is my personal opinion in a hypothetical future, right? If you want to have high frequency trading, it's not only about transactions per second, it's also about latency. You cannot have the latency requirements in a network where all the sequencer nodes and potential integration parties are maybe not even sitting in the same data center connected over LAN. So if the Solana architecture, just as a hypothetical example, is now much more fit towards building a massive high-frequency trading-enabled exchange where specific assets are traded with a lot of TPS, and I'm talking about 50 to maybe 100,000 per second per trading pair, then obviously such a modular architecture is pretty valid to have, because you can boot up another system that is somewhat tied to a DuskDS consensus that you have the decentralized validity guarantees.
You could even do this with, let's say, an application chain that is really application specific. That's just an order book, right? That is based on zero knowledge proofs, and you put the proofs on DuskDS as its state availability and settlement layer, and it just posts every proof or whatever in very tiny batches, in very short time intervals, to reduce the latency as much as possible. You can do a lot of things. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of flexibility in customization around it. Yeah, it can.
Yeah, exactly. You could
applications.
deploy an application. You could deploy an application chain, right? So you can deploy a chain which is not generalistic, but which has enshrined in the protocol the specific operations needed to, for example, run an order book in order to run an exchange. If you provide liquidations because you are trading on leverage there, you could, because that is one of the most critical parts, in my opinion, on perpetual exchanges, that the liquidation engine works flawlessly and efficient. That could also be then inside the protocol. And to have such a distributed system like a real-time database, then you can boot this up as an application-specific blockchain, but you will still derive the security from some underlying DuskDS system.
Right. Amazing. Thank you, guys. That was a perfect answer. Even better than I was hoping for. So thank you. But that brings us to the end of this session. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Have a good one.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice day.